I'm Ruth Jackson, editor of Youth and Children's Work magazine, and I'm here with JB Gill. Now, JB was in one of the biggest boy bands in the UK, JLS, and you are now a presenter, a farmer, a dad. I mean, that's a pretty amazing journey. Hello.
Absolutely. Hello, and thank you for having me.
You are very welcome. So what was your experience of God growing up?
Well, I grew up in church, really. My great aunt, who's kind of like my grandmother, my grandma died when my mum was quite young, so I never met her. And she kind of took on that role, and she's been a Christian since she was 14. So for me, I've always had that presence in my life, and I suppose I've always grown up in and around church, and my mum's a Christian as well, so that's kind of been like the driving force, and I suppose the foundation to everything.
And has that kind of changed and developed over the years, do you think? Or
I always say that every individual, there's always a time for every Christian to make that commitment themselves. And although I did make it at quite a young age, like I was baptized at 8, and I made that decision myself, you go through life, of course, and I think that at that age, and especially as I went into my teenage years, my influences were always on obviously my schoolwork and whatever else, and I was playing rugby to quite a high level, so I was training like 4 or 5 times a week. And I think with the business of life, and also my mum and dad's life as well, they're not together anymore, and I think there was just so much going on that we didn't have the discipline of going to church every week and being able to interact and I suppose have that as a real life foundation. I think the belief of God was always there, things like that, but actually the way that we worked that out, wasn't quite as apparent. So for me, that then transitioned sort of towards the end of JLS, and I was thinking about getting married, talking about children, but they weren't there yet. And for me, it was just a case of, well, what do I want to represent if and when I do have children? Like, what do I want to stand for? I'm going to be an example to them, and how do I be the best example? And so things like the discipline of going to church. I still don't go to church every week because of the nature of what I do, but the discipline is there, and the desire is there as well. And obviously it's portable. It doesn't just have to be at a place every single week or whatever. I try and build that into the infrastructure of my life every single day.
And we both studied theology at university. Why did you make that decision? Because some Christians say that it's a bad thing to do. Some Christians say it's a good thing to do. What was your decision in that?
I think it's a great thing to do, and I did theology at school as well. So that was kind of where the desire to do it. I got an A at A level. It made perfect sense for me to go and do that at university because I knew I'd get a decent grade at least. To be honest, going to university was always more of a backup for me because I knew that I had the ability to do it, but I didn't necessarily want to go into something academic or use a degree as part of what my future. And it just so happened that was the case, and I went into music. But I love the course, and I think it's great. One of the things that as Christians we struggle with is facing those tough questions and being able to stand up and say, this is what I believe, this is why I believe it, and being able to swallow the fact that other people don't have to believe it as well. And one of the things that you see in the Bible, recurring theme, is that it's not just about how people react to it. It's actually about the fact that you've given the message anyway, and even in my own personal life, I've had people give me messages or speak to me when I suppose I was not as strong in my faith, which has down the line spurred a reaction and I suppose given birth to a new desire. So it's really important for people to do that. And I think doing theology, not to say that every Christian's got to do theology, of course, but I think if you're toying with the idea because you think it's very difficult, I wouldn't say it's a bad thing at all. I think it's a really good thing and a good foundation for your future faith.
Yeah, that's what I found as well. Now you left doing theology to join JLS. That must have been an incredible experience. And I guess it's probably really hard to whittle it down to one. But have you got like an overarching best memory of your time at JLS?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember we had been nominated for 3 Brit Awards, and it was a huge night for us because we were performing for the first time at the Brits, and we obviously had the potential to win 3 awards, and we won 2 awards on the night. So that for me is hands down the best career memory.
Amazing. And you must have had an incredible time with the boys and doing all sorts of exciting things. Did you find it difficult to be a Christian in that industry, or was it something that just kind of came naturally?
To be honest, I would say that I didn't necessarily live as a Christian during that time, and not for any reason. Like, it's really, when I look back at it now, it's really funny because I'd still do things like tithe, but I just didn't really have the foundation, as I say, the connection with God that I do now. And I don't think there was any specific reason for that. It wasn't like I got turned away or I was against it or I didn't believe in God or anything like that. But I think just the busyness of life and kind of this new direction, and being a young, I think I was 21 or whatever when JLS kicked off after the X Factor, or turning 22, and being ambitious and being driven and wanting to succeed in that arena, and as we know, there's not a huge amount of Christian presence in that industry, and you get swept along. I'll definitely say that happened with me. But there were always things that that you see that occur that you are against, and it's really funny because I say to people all the time, you see in the newspapers people being affected by drink and drugs and stuff like that, and it was never really apparent to me. It was never really in my face. It was never really offered to me or anything like that. So I do believe that I was protected, myself and the boys. None of the boys do any of that. Obviously, we will consume alcohol, but we're not, off the rails or anything like that. And I think that was not coincidence. I think I was protected in that industry. And as I say, it then spurned, I suppose when I made that transition, decided I wanted to get married and things like that, it then was able to give me a good foundation for actually discovering what faith meant to me and what God means to me in Christ and so on and so forth, and how I can work that out.
Was there kind of a defining moment then when your faith became real to you? Or was it a kind of gradual thing, do you think?
It was a gradual thing for me. I mean, the first thing that happened to me was I was on tour, and I can't remember which tour it was, probably our third tour, I'd say. I mean, we'd not announced that we were going to break up at this point, and there were some fans that we had in Scotland, and I had no idea that they were Christians. I had no idea they went to church or anything like that. They were just fans that we saw all the time, saw at the airports or events or gigs, whatever. And they came up to me and they gave me a present. Now, we're used to receiving presents, especially when we go to places like Scotland, because we don't go that often. And they gave it to me, but they were like really urgent, and they said, "Don't open it now. Open it when you get to your hotel room." And I was like, "That's weird. Why would they say that? Like, I always open it in the car or whatever, straight away." But I did what they said. And when I got into my hotel room, I opened the present, and it was a Bible. Oh. Now I've got loads of Bibles. There's no shortage of Bibles in my house. Even then, I have loads of Bibles. But I was really touched, like straight, like out of the blue. I was just like that's a God sign. That's just straight. There's no distinguishing that. And they had, had a little note, and they said, we go to church and we've been praying for you, blah, blah, blah. And, we've seen that you've mentioned this a couple of times. And so, we're really, really scared, but we wanted to go and do this. And I suppose that was the beginning of that transition, I'd say, because that just really smacked me in the face. Really made me think, well, what am I doing about this? These guys are the ones following you, but actually they're being leaders in their own right, because they're saying this is important. You need to reconnect with that. And as I say, for me, that was coming from God, but just using them as a vessel. And it really, all of the things that I know and, I've grown up knowing and obviously, studied and all the rest of it, it was not just about knowledge. It was actually about how you physically work that out. Do you know what I mean? As well. And so that's how it all started.
Do you think when you became a dad, that kind of changed the way that you view God and your relationship with God?
Absolutely. I mean, now Ace is 3 years old, so you can imagine that he's given as good as he gets, and he's pushing all the boundaries. He's a brilliant boy, I must say. So it's not a case of we're struggling there, but absolutely, I 100% see the relationship between myself and God as one of His children, and Ace and myself. And I see the things. He'll do things that I'm like, Ace, I've just told you not to do that. And he's just gone and done exactly the same thing. And then I think to myself, do you know what? God told me not to do whatever. And I just kept doing it. Or whatever. Do you know what I mean? I really do. And I suppose more so now than before, I can really see the connection. And I'm really grateful that we've got Ace and we're expecting another, and that I have children, because I think, especially for me, the way I learn, it's great to see that example, and it helps me to parent Ace better, I hope, and I think, but at the same time it helps me to develop obedience, because I'd say for me, probably for all of us, that's the thing that I struggle with most.
And do you kind of intentionally bring your faith into your parenting?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just, little things like, singing to Ace and, reading every night. He always wants us, well, multiple stories, but I always try and make sure that the last story that we read is a biblical story, and it could be a biblical book, or it could be, he's got like a sort of, thick sort of book of Bible stories, or it could even be from I say the adult Bible, you know what I mean? It could be from the actual biblical text, and he loves all the stories like David and Goliath and stuff like that. And for me, I just think it sets a tone. I mean, he's going through a phase at the moment. Like he was, as an example, he really, really enjoyed praying. So he'd always be like, "Daddy, you've got to pray. You can't leave without praying," and stuff like that. And now he's in a phase where he doesn't want to do it. He wants me to do it, and I try and encourage him to do it. At least to repeat after me or whatever. Because I think things like that just sow the seed for later on, and I've seen it personally in my life. As I say, my great aunt, she's always encouraged me. She always said, everything that you do, you should do for God and all this sort of stuff. And to be honest, growing up, I never really understood how that could work. But now, more so, I can see how that is the case. And I try and do everything or at least test everything against what I believe.
What are some of the biggest highs and lows of parenting? Again, that's probably really hard to whittle down, but some of the really difficult things and some of the absolute blessings of being a dad.
I always start with bad news first. So the difficult things for me, I think, is perseverance. It really, as I say, it's the hardest thing when you can see that your child is doing something wrong. You can see that they're continually doing the same thing, and they're capable of doing something that won't do them harm or is the right thing or whatever, and you just having to have that patience with them and continue to and not get frustrated, not get not get angry beyond reason, and just keep going. And I'm encouraged because little things like when he was growing up, he used just little tasks like using knife and fork, or putting his own clothes on or whatever else. Like he goes through phases now where he can fully dress himself, and then today he decides, what, I can't put my boots on. I'm like, what do you mean you can't put your boots on? You put your boots on every single day. I brush your teeth every single day, but there's a problem at this moment in time with teeth brushing. But it's just, trying not to be too hard on them, but at the same time, just giving them time, because they all get to the stage where they pick up the toothbrush themselves and then they brush their own teeth. And thankfully, my mum and dad don't still brush my teeth, so I know there's hope. There's light at the end of the tunnel. And for me, that's the most difficult thing, really, just trying to persevere. And the best thing is just being able to see when they thrive, and see when they do things that they are best suited to, like he's really very physical. The other day we were out in the garden, just little things. We were out in the garden, and he's got quite a tactile mind. So he was working out how he could hitch the ladder to his tractor. He's got like a little sort of ride-on pedal tractor. And you just saw him sort of working it out, and he didn't get it right, and he couldn't do it. And then he looped it in. I don't know how he did it because I didn't show him, but he looped it into to this piece of string or whatever, and then hooked it onto his tractor. And then he was so pleased with himself that he'd been able to do it all by himself. And he was like, "Daddy, I just done it. I did it by myself." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's amazing." But it's amazing when you see them achieve things. It doesn't have to be incredible, this, that, and the other. But it's even those little small things. You're just seeing their development right in front of your eyes. It's amazing.
And you're a busy guy. You're a farmer. You're a presenter. You're traveling. How do you prioritize family time?
It's difficult, and it's becoming more difficult, to be honest, as I suppose my popularity develops within that world. And I've not been in the television world that long, although obviously music is relatively close to it, related to it. I just try and set certain standards. So as an example, I mean, I still do work on Sundays sometimes, but I set more of a precedent for not working on Sundays. And unless it's something that is carrying through a week, so for instance, it might be Friday to Tuesday and I have to do a Sunday, then I'll do it. Whereas if it's not one day on a Sunday, then I'll tend not to do it. And just being able to set that, even if it's just that one day, sometimes I get more days, but if it's just that one day where I'm with the family, we go to church together, or even if we don't go to church, we're at home together, we just spend that time. I think is really, really important. And I'm in a position now, which I was never able to do within JLS, to be able to set days aside. So like his sports day is coming up in June or whatever. So I've set that day aside. That's not going to go out of the diary. And I think you just have to set these benchmarks sometimes, especially when you're in the industry that I'm in, or we're in, should I say. It's really, really hard, and it's not always focused on me. I work with other people as well, and they don't necessarily believe the same things that I believe. And I don't think that I think that, especially at this time of my life, my career is an important part of that. And, obviously it provides for the family and so on and so forth. So I still need to do it. But at the same time, there has to be some balance. And, we've recently just come off a 2-week holiday to Crete, which is lovely. And, I was just there, I didn't do any work. There was nothing. It was just nice to actually spend time with the family. And I think that's important as well.
And you took the obvious route after music into farming. I mean, why would you not? And you present Down on the Farm, CBeebies programme. So why are you so passionate about educating children, particularly in this area?
Well, I mean, I have my own children, and as I touched on, it's really important because regardless of how good or bad I am an example to them, and whether I want the title or not, I'm still an example to them. And I'm in the position where I'm an example to lots of people because of my profile, because of the things that I've done in my life and my career and stuff like that. And for me, it's something that I've always been passionate about for my children, and I'm lucky, and I want to use the as I say, my past and my profile and stuff like that to be able to do that for other children as well. I think I've always had a bit of an affinity for working with children. And I enjoy working with children. I think they're brilliant. I think some of the stuff they come out with is just priceless. And they teach me a lot as well. And food is something that I've always been passionate about. And I grew up in the Caribbean, so like my knowledge of food and my proximity to where my food comes from and the origins of my food and how it's sourced and how it's eaten and how it's cooked is really important. And for me, I think in this country, we really struggle with that connectivity. We really struggle with that relationship when it comes to our food because we've got so much food. In fact, we waste a lot of it. And the understanding that we have, myself included, of our food and where it comes from and how to successfully, consume it is negative, really, and we're seeing that in all of the press, the rise of veganism and people distrusting the sources of their meat and things like that. These are all issues, environmental issues as well. When you talk about the methane that comes from cattle and the production there, the issues that people have with like the dairy industry and stuff like that, the prices that farmers are getting for that compared to the consumption that we have, the import-export versus export market. We don't even need to get into Brexit. There's so much in the press at the moment and within our society. And for me, it just comes down to our lack of closeness to that industry and the understanding that comes from, or I suppose that we had historically, really, And
you've got to start them young, right?
Absolutely. I think that's the best time to start. If you look on as an example, you watch cartoons and stuff like that. There's so many things in a lot of those films and cartoons and so on that our children are being taught, without them necessarily knowing or without us even knowing. And I think the good things are just as valuable. Not that the cartoons are all bad. I'm just saying, as an example, there are lots of things that are learnt in those mediums, and I think some of the things that we hold dear, that we think are really important, should also be promoted as young as possible. 1, 2, 3. I teach my son to cook now. I don't shy away from letting him use a knife, obviously with my supervision, but being actually cutting things, because he gets really frustrated if I say, no, you can't do this and you can't do that and you can't do whatever, but he sees me doing it all the time. So actually it's about teaching them how to safely use it, or teaching him how to be involved, or having his own task while I'm doing something that's maybe a bit too dangerous for him, and actually including him in the whole thing rather than excluding him and saying, well, you learn at a later date.
And you are an ambassador for the Mayor's Fund for London, which exists to kind of help young people from disadvantaged backgrounds. Why is that such an important thing to you?
I just think when I look at ACE and lots of the children that I'm around, family, friends and so on, they have access to so much that this country offers. They have access to the best things. They're able to do so much, you know what I mean? And especially for Ace, we live in the countryside, but we're not that far from London. We can come in, do this, that, and the other. You know, we're able to take time out and go on holidays and stuff like that. And not every family in this nation is able to do that. You know, not every family in London is able to do that. And there's lots of single parent families, as an example, whose mum or dad want that for their children. They want them to go and visit these places. They want them to have access to the countryside. They want them to be able to learn more about their environment, stuff like that. But they're working a full-time job, you know, and so those children are either looked after by other people or maybe left at home themselves or whatever. And I think especially the way that society's going this day and age, where individuals, maybe like myself or whatever, especially with reality TV being so popular now, are placed on a pedestal, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that. That, you know, I'm sure we've all had idols growing up and stuff like that. But for me, as Christians, our ultimate idol is Jesus Christ, you know, and we want to emulate him, and that there's a blueprint there, because we're supposed to be, you know, examples for other people as well. And as I say, if our society is so driven by that, then it's about being that person and promoting positive values, positive aspects of our society for the young people coming through to aspire to, and to hopefully go into fill those positions of power and positivity as well.
So I guess if you could go back to your 15-year-old self, knowing everything that you have learned along the way, is there any advice that you'd give yourself, anything, any sort of encouragement in the Christian faith, or I guess just general good advice that you'd give yourself?
Well, across the board, I would say to people, or to young people sort of in their GCSE range, to do as much as you can for as long as you can. Because one of the things that I did, and I suppose it just without that knowledge, was I gave up on a lot of things. Not for any reason, because with music, although I did give up on playing my instruments, that did come sort of full circle. I ended up having a career in music. But I would definitely have continued playing my music, because it would have had so much more of a positive impact when I finally went into, I suppose, the pop world of music. So I'd say do as much as you can for as long as you can. And from a Christian perspective, it would just be to remember to read and pray every day. Read my Bible and pray every day. Because it's just one of those things that, you know, the discipline of doing that is really, really difficult to master. I still haven't done it. But it's so essential.
Why are you so passionate about children and about young people?
I just believe that children are our future, you know, and I would have loved to have had that encouragement when I was younger. I did have a lot of encouragement, but, you know, I think it's an ongoing thing, and especially in this day and age when children are so influenced, you know, and it's become, you know, younger and younger and younger they're becoming influenced. And I think the foundations start when they're young, you know. It says it obviously biblically in Proverbs to train a child in the way that they should go, so when they're old they will not depart from it. And for me, I just stand by that, especially with my children. I think as much as they can do when they're younger, and it's not to overload them. I think they're just capable of it. Their minds are such sponges, you know, things come easily. They don't have fear. They've not learnt to reject lots of different things. And obviously when the input is good, for me, it can only be a good thing. They're not going to keep doing it necessarily. They're not going to do it all the way throughout their lives, but the foundation is there. And especially for me, like, as I say, I grew up in church. There was a period in my life where I did step away from that in terms of like my practice, although the belief was still there. But then that foundation has really helped me through difficult times and helped me to come back, do you mean, to what and to question what I believe in and what I stand for and what I'm about. And for me, I believe that has really helped me in my life and will help me forevermore. So I just think that children are the future, you know, and I think we've spent, well, for me, my understanding of it is society spent a long time trying to achieve and accomplish and do, you know, I suppose that this generation that are in power and control, you know, trying to achieve and do so. And for me, actually, there's no success of that succession. You know, and there will come a time when those people, whoever, whether it's the leaders of the nation or the world or whatever, will step down. They will pass on. They will change. And so we have to be able to give back as well as, you know, strive for achievement ourselves. And I just love it. For me, I just love when I see younger people coming through, younger people standing up and saying, this is what I believe, younger people standing and wanting to be on a pedestal and say, this is what I'm about, this is what I want to do. I don't have any limits because I can do all things in Christ. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just amazing.
And they've not got the cynicism that we've got as well, that, you know, they think they can do anything, which is brilliant, isn't it?
Exactly. And it's about, you know, they will learn those things, and they will learn that sometimes they're not going to get their own way, and, you know, they're not always going to be successful in everything, you know. But for me, it's about encouraging them to believe, and encouraging them to have that ambition, because, you know, ultimately that's what God wants. He wants us to have full lives. He wants us to be, you know, unbound, not to bound ourselves and to say, do you know what, we can't do this and we can't do that. Why not? We can. You know, but obviously it's qualified as well within, you know, the things that we do, the things that we learn, the things that are right to do, all the rest of it. And I think that, for me, that is a really, really important part of our future as a society.
Young people love music, all sorts of different music. Do you think that's an important way to help them engage with God through music?
Absolutely. I think if you look in the Bible, music has been integral to our relationship with God and worship. And I think music is powerful, extremely powerful. You know, in fact, I say it to my wife all the time, like, she'll have whatever radio station on, and she'll be singing a song back, and I'm like, babe, do you know what you're singing? And she's like, no, just a song that's on at the moment. And that can be good, that can be bad, whatever. But, you know, music has a way of breaking through different boundaries, you know, and it's one of those industries actually, which is, although there's lots of politics in every industry, and very much so in that industry, you know, is able to break different barriers. You know, there's much more diversity within that industry than a lot of other industries, popular industries. And so I do think that it's a powerful tool to be able to reach lots of different people and around the world.
And JB, if we want to find out more about what you're up to, where should we go?
Well, you can go to my website, www.jbgill.com, and there's loads of updates and information about what I'm doing and where I'm going.
Brilliant. JB Gill, thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Judges 2 verse 10 says that a generation grew up who neither knew the Lord nor remembered his mighty works.
We want to say, not on our watch. Premier Youth and Children's Work aims to equip and support those passionate about raising the next generation. Think of the magazine as a monthly hug to remind you you're not alone, and to encourage you to keep going in your incredibly important role.
But we're also here to give you a bit of a loving kick up the arse, to spur you on to reach the millions of children and young people who don't yet know the remarkable hope of the gospel.
We look at the latest trends in youth and children's culture and hear from various practitioners across the country. Plus, the magazine is packed full of resources for children's, youth and families workers, as well as for parents.
Visit youthandchildrens.work to find out more and to subscribe.